if you need that many touch points, you either shouldn't be hiring for the role or you just shouldn't be hiring that person. I believe you should be able to decide on a person in 3 meetings or less. You can't delegate creating, good onboarding, good hiring processes, retention, engagement, like all those cultural elements, those pieces that aren't exactly just the job title or the role need to come from the top, need to have influence. Sure, startups move a mile a minute, but if you're not going to slow down for something as important as onboarding and hiring and onboarding, you'll be eventually forced to slow down because you'll be losing people and you won't be able to fill the roles that you need to fill.
Welcome to the Generation Hustle Podcast, the show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Sherrison, alongside my good friend Amin, and this week we're back to our regularly scheduled programming, starting off 2022 with a great guest from the world of HR. Episode 59 is with Evan Hallward, co-founder and co-CEO at Onboarding. Onboarding enables growing startups and small businesses to find, implement, and automate their people programs. Everything from onboarding to offboarding and everything in between. Onboarding ensures that employees will be better prepared to succeed. We talked to Evan about his motivation behind founding this platform. He details how his experiences in recruitment and HR led him to building a people-focused company of his own. This was a great conversation with so many learnings. We've all had our fair share of bad interviews and employment experiences, so if you're looking to revamp your recruitment and employee engagement process, this episode is sure to help.
All right, sweet. So today we have Evan on the podcast, who's the founder of Onboarding. He brings an interesting kind of story because he doesn't come from a traditional, say, tech background. And so I wanted to first talk about, what your journey to entrepreneurship was and kind of what led you down the path to being a founder. And maybe a subsequent question to that is, what has been the most rewarding and most challenging part of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, thanks, Aman. Happy to be on the podcast. Really excited to be here. So let's talk about my entrepreneurial journey. Why not? I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think it's just ingrained in how I think, how I look at the world, my psyche, and like in maybe a sort of somewhat succession-like world. My dad's an entrepreneur. His dad was an entrepreneur. A lot of family members are entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial. I chose tech as my field. I just love seeing how technology is used in our day-to-day lives to live healthy or productive, but also at work to how we can work better or more efficiently. The entrepreneur path, I don't know, it felt like I was just natural. I would end up here. The most rewarding part about being an entrepreneur is this sense that you really get to make profound change with your work or with what you do in your day-to-day. That's a really rewarding feeling. And for me in particular, seeing a customer be truly enthusiastic and excited to use our product to help them. And, so we just want to help people. Like, I know we're not curing cancer or anything, but in our own way, making an impact. As far as challenges, when you're an entrepreneur and transitioning out of like a full-time role where, someone's taking care of payroll and someone's, giving you some direction, you really realize quickly that you have to carry your own weight. There's no clocking in or clocking out. You should and hopefully have great partners, great early employees, advisors, investors who've got your back. But at the end of the day, it's on you. You're on your own. So for me, there's been some challenges about finding that mental balance between work and non-work. It's a lot of blurred lines.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the things that founders always say is like they reach out to other founders to kind of get some ease or like that mental ease of how do you approach the situation? So have you been kind of like actively doing that as well to kind of, ease yourself from a founder perspective? Like you just mentioned, like sometimes it's really hard and challenging being a founder.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Great point. I think Canada, coast to coast has a really awesome entrepreneurial, group or energy, I should say. So I've been able to connect with some great Canadian-based entrepreneurs, Toronto, Vancouver, out to Halifax, and it does help. There's that element of understanding what you're struggling with, understanding the kind of pains, offering support, and even founders who are in like almost competitors, similar businesses. It's, you're not competing. Like we're all out here just trying to do our best and succeed and, achieve our mission. And so I think that's definitely been a great, upside benefit, is to sort of being in that kind of that cohort.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so, your focus with a board is really on the whole onboarding, retention, engagement side of things for companies and helping employees having the most kind of successful experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we have employees, they go through interviews for roles, and, a lot of my peers have been increasingly more selective, I'll say, with the companies they choose. One, obviously, the hiring market is just like that now, with so many roles open and such selective in terms of talent base that there is available for that role. Would you kind of say what would be like a successful interview process, and like how does that kind of feed back into like the onboarding process? Because I think we've all been there and we've experienced bad interviews, but like in your opinion, what do you think a successful interview process looks like?
Yeah, I think, a successful interview process, I really boiled down to two key elements. So one is clarity and the other is people. So from a clarity standpoint, really being able to answer yes to, does the candidate know what's going to happen next? Is there very clear structure and steps that they, can expect and know that they're in that process, they're going through that flow? And then do they know who they're going to meet, and why are they meeting this person? Like, what's the significance to being interviewed by an individual at the organization? So the next point, people, is ensuring that you're not just checking boxes and answering some preset questions. Is there an opportunity in your interview process to actually be human and get to know the person you're interviewing, and for them to get to know you, a little bit of an actual personal touch beyond just like the rigid, X, Y, and Z of a job description. Last point on people, really important, is to bring in peers for the person you're interviewing. So don't just have it as, HR and managers, but actually someone that they might be working alongside in their day to day. So, you get that clarity piece, you get that people piece correct at the interview process. That energy, that flow just goes right into onboarding. And so, your onboarding should kind of reflect that. It should be clear. It should be have the right people involved, and, a few other things. But, if you can get that right at the interview process, then it really just sort of carries through.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome point. Just focusing on that aspect of, also having some of your peers involved, because these are the kind of the individuals that you're going to work with, but also from maybe like a experience level, those are the pieces, people that you have the most kind of affiliation to in terms of experience and understanding. So I feel like that's important. And I know a lot of peers who only talk to, managers or senior managers, and they're just like, okay, like I know I'm going to be managed in this way and form, but how's my experience from a cultural standpoint going to be? And that's what I feel like you're just mentioning. It's really important to have that involved. My next point maybe is a lot of companies nowadays, especially like say the startup space, have like sometimes, 6+ rounds of interviews for, even junior to mid-level roles. And so like, what would your thoughts be on that? Especially when today, like talent's really hard to come by. I feel like everyone's trying to become like a Google in terms of their hiring process, when Google's like a really sophisticated engine and huge corporation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I find if you need that many touch points, you either shouldn't be hiring for the role, or you just shouldn't be hiring that person that you're talking to. So if you need a fourth, fifth, sixth conversation, I believe you should be able to decide on a person in three interviews or three meetings or less, and typically it's three because there's different people involved. You're obviously looking to remove bias or remove one person making the decision. So I'm thinking three conversations is like somewhere in an HR or on the people's team, the hiring manager, management staff, and then that peer or colleague that we talked about earlier. So you go through those 3 conversations, they can all come together, and you should be able to make a decision. Like, you should know. And if you're really still asking yourself, then you probably know it's not a good fit. So it can go up from there if you're talking like mid to senior roles, but still don't go crazy. And that kind of war for talent piece. Yeah. Like, it is tough. It's hot out here, and the world's shifting. Are you a remote company? Are you a hybrid company? Do you have offices? Do they need to be in offices? All that stuff's still kind of playing out. But what you cannot forget is in this war for talent, how important it is to maintain that employer brand. And that's in your interviewing. That you interview a person, and even if you pass on them, they're still going to remember how you made them feel throughout that process, and they're going to talk about that. And so if you totally mess around, you had 10 conversations and then you pass on them, they're going to remember that, and they're going to talk about it. So you really want to make sure that it's you're just doing something with purpose, something structured, something very transparent, and treating people like people.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very strong point. A lot of people, from a startup standpoint, don't realize the impact of, even though that person's not actively a part of your organization, there is an inherent something that can go on in the background, which may, reduce the amount of volume that you have from an intake perspective of applicants. So, great point there. And then one of the other things maybe you've often heard is hire for passion, or hire that scrappy person, especially with startups. What's your philosophy when it comes to hiring, and do you think there's like a formula to it, agnostic of any role?
Yeah, this is I think when it comes to hiring for startups in particular, you're so early. I think you really do have to have that gut feeling, or trust your gut. Like, even if you are going sort of off of gut over a formula, for example, and your gut fails you 1 in 10 times, you're still coming out on top if you're using some sort of Googled formula, or even Google's formula. We talked about how they're kind of structured, rigid, and big, right? Startups are all about risk. Every person you hire is a risk. You're obviously to try to de-risk that by maybe having some formula, having some sort of long interview cycles or tests or restrictive, contracts once you actually hire them. But at the end of the day, you've got to fill the role and keep moving. So, hire who feels right, but of course have enough sort of data and hard reference points to back up that decision.
Just staying on the topic of startups, one thing we like to get is, obviously it's hard to get that right, especially when you're doing so many things all at once in that kind of environment. And I believe that many of us have experienced that kind of poor employment experience, whether it's through onboarding or engagement or retention. But let's kind of stay on onboarding right now. In the startup world, what would you say are some of the critical areas where startups get wrong, or get maybe, a little distorted in that process? And, maybe that's an example that you've seen or you've experienced personally yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think like a bit of both. Definitely seeing a lot of and have experience, but like we talked about, you're working so hard to find this talent, to find these people to fill these crucial roles. I think a huge mistake startups are making is that they're not starting with a bang, starting their employees with like a really awesome experience. You've got to go hard on integrating that new employee quickly. Like, you do want things to be very fluid and happen quickly, but it's got to be purposeful. It's got to be structured. It's got to bring in, other people. So yeah, like you can't forget to send them their laptop if that's something you're doing. You can't forget to set up their accesses. You can't forget to schedule the meetings with them. And you can't really just take for granted that they're going to show up on their first day and know what to do and know what's going to happen next and know who to talk to. Like, they're not, and they're going to have a bad experience, and with a lot of consequences if you're not that purposeful. So sure, startups move a mile a minute. But if you're not going to slow down for something as important as onboarding and, hiring and onboarding, you'll be eventually forced to slow down because you'll be losing people and you won't be able to fill the roles that you need to fill.
Absolutely. And if you don't have one, that's fine. But do you have a specific example, maybe from your experience, of that affecting your performance? I think you touched on it really well, and how you start with a bang, but if you don't, that can I find that can actually like impact your performance on the job 1-3 months in even. So like, is there anything like that for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I've definitely worked in startups and, in small businesses where it's been quite informal and you're just sort of rolling with it and it's not great. To be honest, like my one sort of more horrible experience was actually at a larger company, at a Fortune 500, which just goes to show that the issue of onboarding is shared by companies of all shapes and sizes. But it was a larger company, which whatever can remain nameless for now, but a super smart team, cool products. I was really excited for this kind of new role, and I think it could have been a really sort of pivotal career move and whatever. I could have gone down a whole path, but now I'm here with my own company, so I can't complain. But one of the first red flags for me was when the role was very undefined. And even as I was going through the interview process and being offered it, my job title, like I only found out my job title when they sent me a piece of paper, where really, from the moment you're interviewing for a job, it should be very clear what you're interviewing for, what you're going towards, et cetera. So obviously that should have kind of signaled to me that they weren't really sure how they were going to onboard me if they weren't even sure what job I was going to be walking into. So the two big pains from there was that it was just a super old school, Fortune 500 type onboarding videos and like platform, very like snooze fest. And then aside from that, and more of my day to day, it was completely structureless. And there was this sort of like, oh yeah, just do what you need to do type of mentality that obviously is not really conducive and not, of course, at the time, I'm a smart guy. So I was like, oh, I'll figure it out. I can do it, whatever. But I was gone before my probation ended. Within 3 months, I moved on. It was a bit mutual. Like, I think there was this, I'll totally admit that, I wasn't probably performing to the expectations they had. But likewise, I was also feeling like, what is going on? Like, I don't even know. I can't see a future here, unfortunately. So left very disappointed. And now kind of looking back with all this work we've done on a board and kind of where we're at, I'm like, man, like if I just had better onboarding, who knows? I could be like, controlling that company now. It could have gone very differently.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe to add on to that. So, you know how sometimes employees get a negative perception for leaving a place in a very short amount of time? What are your thoughts on that? Because, you mentioned that story. It wasn't the right environment for you. You weren't given the kind of correct tools to make yourself successful early on. And that way you made the decision to leave. So how in an interview process or when you're expressing these kind of decisions you made, would you go about kind of telling that story in a way where it's informative and not kind of damaging to your reputation?
Yeah, so understanding, like how to present that forward, right? Yeah, and so I think being honest, being transparent. There's life is complicated, work is complicated, profession is complicated. So you may end up in a role that doesn't work out, and you might be gone from there sooner than you thought, or like unintentionally, you have to move on pretty quickly. Yeah, it doesn't look good. Like LinkedIn, CVs, just like subjectively, you might have certain individuals that will look at that and sort of dismiss it as a negative. But I think, again, if you just own that story and be really clear, I would say, don't just show up at your next interview and badmouth that last employer and say, they screwed up, they missed out on a great opportunity to employ me. It's like, no, like acknowledge what really happened, your role in it, maybe what you critically sort of think could have gone differently for you to have succeeded, or why that was just not an option. So that's kind of what I did. And, it worked out in the long run, and it's just part of your story, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it, and you definitely shouldn't try to like hide it explicitly.
For sure. So just going along the process, then obviously the next step, if you had stayed on longer there, it would have been keeping you engaged and happy with the job and what you're doing. So first off, let's just kind of stay on there. How do you define engagement within an organization? Like, what do you think are the important factors that go into that in keeping an employee engaged and active in that workplace?
Yeah, like defining engagement. I know, I think it's maybe people might have their own sort of notions on it. I sort of look at it as what's happening on top of an employee's role. So you're hired for a job. That job is, it's pretty defined. It's some sort of technical role or a sales or customer service role, but it's the stuff that's happening on top of that that will lead you to be more engaged. You can be engaged by the work for sure, but yeah, like every company probably wants their people doing their job, 100% of the time. You're just always selling or you're always coding. But realistically, we're human. We like interactions, we like experiences, we like feeling, excited or fun. So those are engagement should lead to those sort of emotions. Uh, I just go on and sort of loop into engagement the idea of ongoing learning, development opportunities, as a form of engagement. So you have the opportunity to continue expanding and growing yourself around your role within the company. But yeah, I think engagement can look more like it's culture, it's mentorship, special programs that the organization might offer to you.
Absolutely. And I think those are important things to have, especially, or that an important conversation to have even during the interview process, just to see what kind of resources that you have on hand. My next question was going to be what some of the things companies can implement. And you mentioned it already, right? Ongoing learning, mentorship, and any outside services that they can kind of take advantage of. Is there anything else that you would kind of highlight there that companies can offer or put in place to make the engagement onwards going forward, just kind of connected at all times?
Yeah, if I was talking to another entrepreneur, a leader, some form, the one word of caution I'd start with is not to take for granted that an employee is going to like step up and, create a program or be a culture ambassador or sort of create their own engagement. That does happen. And you're lucky if you have people on your team who are kind of proactive in that way. Some low hanging fruit though that we talk a lot about at a board and sort of talk with our customers about is a buddy system. Pretty key to like onboarding, but yeah, you take your new employee, you line them up with a colleague, typically or ideally a colleague from a different department, not the same team that they're going to work with anyways. So pick someone sort of kind of further afield to connect them with. Great for onboarding, but typically can extend beyond. So you end up with sort of people who are now friends or talking to people in other departments, and it keeps the company a bit more together. A mentoring system, so pick that senior leader, pair them with a junior, set some structured meeting times and some goals or like just general material that might help them to help the mentoring system to be successful. One-on-one with leaders. So this is one I always find kind of fun. I still meet with every employee at my company once a month. Now, like we're a pretty small team, so it's not super hard to do. But I still think, even at in a larger setting, large department of a very large company, if you're looking at that, it's important to try to, not to create a hierarchy, try to make the organization feel very close and tight and where there's a direct line of communication from the leadership to frontline to new people. And last but not least, I'd say look at investing in learning. How do you make it really easy for your people to continue to learn and grow? You want to hire people that want to do that. So a lot of companies, of course, will offer like some stipend or some sort of tuition coverage, but it could be as easy as buying like a $10 Udemy course and say, here you go.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love that point that you mentioned on the one-on-ones. I think that's incredible. Obviously, much easier when you're smaller, but just to that point, I was a part of a large CPG company that scheduled meetings with all of the new hires with the CEO, and it's great just to see
Nice.
that.
Yeah.
And they would even do it like 6 months out from when you started because that's how busy that person is. So to your point, like you can still continue that, and I think just having that on your calendar, it still speaks volume to be like, I have an opportunity to do that, even if it's not immediately. So I don't think it's don't worry about being too small right now. I think even when you grow, you can still do that.
Right on. Love it. Yeah.
But so going on to kind of like the next step, and I hate to keep harping on that one job of yours, but with retention, we want to know kind of what things companies can do to make sure that they're retaining their talent. Obviously, in that instance, it didn't work out, but I'm sure that kind of sparked ideas for you to be like, hey, if you did this, maybe I would have changed my mind on leaving. So can you speak to some of the things that companies can do to retain talent once they've passed all of these stages?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of building off some of the points you shared earlier, I would say like retention, engagement, they really go hand in hand. Like you're looking to engage your people so they stick around, and ideally they're sticking around because they're being engaged. So, two added dimensions to, buddy system and one-on-ones and stuff like that is thinking about, like, I hate to use the term benefits, but the comprehensive like benefits, perks of working for your company. Sure, like people want to be paid competitively and fairly, and they want vacation maybe and health support. But some of the stuff that is harder to assign a dollar value can actually be incredibly valuable. So flexibility, autonomy, doing work that they want to do. And so, if you're hiring for a role that there's an option, you're working on really cool technology, cool like frameworks, building cool stuff, people would be willing to take maybe a pay cut even, but to go and work on that thing in particular. And it's just more engaging than if they were working in some larger company on really boring, mundane things. So thinking of retention, think of it as that sort of comprehensive, like, what is it that you're truly offering to your people and going forward? And so, and on the going forward front is there a clear growth path for individuals at your company? Are you actually talking about the future, or are you just focusing on like what they should be doing, today, next week type of thing? So obviously everyone wants to know that they're working at a place that has upside, that has opportunity for growth, or, some sort of financial gain in the long run. So talking about that, being really purposeful, but talking to your people around what their future with your company could look like, the future of the company with them in it could look like. I think, that's a really nice motivator and a good way to retain people.
Kind of on the flip side of that, can you speak to maybe the responsibility of the company in being aware of this? And what I mean by that is, I think as an example, startups kind of see a lot of high turnover. And what we want to know is, do you think companies should have the awareness to kind of expect a shorter life cycle or a longer life cycle based on the factors of the role and what they provide?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think it'd be so defeatist of a startup founder or, early startup team to be like, oh, we're just going to lose our people every 6 to 12 months to Amazon. Like, that's a fact of life. So I say no. Like, startups, you should be hiring people and really investing in them and expect that they're investing back into you. I sort of look at it as if you have an employee or a prospective candidate who's looking at you and comparing you to Amazon or Facebook or, one of the big FANG, and like you're like, they're already wrong for your company. Like, the people who want to work at a startup should want to work at a startup. It shouldn't necessarily be like, okay, who's going to pay me the most and look good on my resume in the long run or something like that. So yeah, like, there's the benefits of working at a startup. You get more control over your work. You feel impact. You get to talk directly to the leadership and really see the impact of your choices or your suggestions take shape and actually like happen. So I think startups should not expect, that every employee is going to turn over quickly. They should really be trying to find the right employees that are going to stick with them through all the, turns.
And you mentioned, leadership and the importance of that as well. That's like a last point that I wanted to touch on in this topic here. Obviously, like the whole process of onboarding, engagement, and all of that involves a whole bunch of people. It takes a lot of facets in there. But can you kind of highlight the importance of leadership there, whether it's a CEO, and kind of how that balances both aspects there?
Yeah. So, I think it's got to come from the top. I think you can't delegate this sort of, creating these practices, creating, good onboarding, good hiring processes, retention, engagement, like all those cultural elements, those pieces that aren't exactly just the job title or the role, need to come from the top, need to have influence from, the most senior leader and those around them. A really great example of this is Jordan from Notch. So their chief people officer, Christine, is an advisor to a board, all transparency. And she says to us, like, Jordan vocalized, he's like, I want really good culture. I want to treat people well. And just saying that, even just making that sort of statement has the ripple effects of really driving people towards doing that, driving his team, his leadership team, who then drive, any sort of managers all the way down to the front end. So yeah, you really have to create that culture from the top down, and that leadership needs to be really purposeful in fostering these people programs, like as we like to call them, that we've been talking about.
Maybe just to add on to that, how important is it to also invest in development of those leaders through like training programs and stuff? Because a lot of times what happens is you have someone who's task oriented go into a manager role.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're not used to managing, which is a completely different thing. So what are your thoughts on that, and how important that is to kind of also along the lines of retention, engagement, and stuff like that, culture impact the overall kind of organization?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's, we talked about startups are risky. And even if you're later stage where you have the opportunity to take a frontline person and turn them into a manager, that's a risk. But they're likely still at your organization because you believe in them, and they, you see something in them, they see something in you. You're giving them a new, unique opportunity to learn and grow. And again, ideally, you're hiring people who want to learn and grow. And so, as best as possible, provide them with the opportunity, coaching, courses, whatever it is, to help them in what is a really exciting transition from maybe sort of frontline individual contributor to management and to sort of more leadership. And I really do believe in that whole sort of hiring within and growing within. Like it could not work out, sure, but I think there's a higher percent chance that it does. And so you just got to really be purposeful.
Yeah, no, awesome point there. And now, so we've talked about, onboarding, retention, engagement, but let's talk about what you're actually building now at a board. So could you kind of walk us through how you're kind of helping the HR world per se, and kind of, how you're helping HR professionals and companies become better at all those three sections?
Yeah. So, at a board, our mission is to make work more human. When we're doing this by helping those HR people leaders at growing companies to create, discover, and even share the people programs that they need to scale their companies. So people programs, we're talking like onboarding, learning development, career growth, everything all the way to offboarding from the employee experience standpoint. We're taking an approach of just trying to make it open, accessible, really easy, and then most importantly is automated. So having built the software to help take these people programs like onboarding, automate all the boring, mundane tasks like sending out emails and booking calendar invites, organizing and delegating all the necessary tasks that need to happen to enable your people to succeed. And then lastly, engaging that new employee or that employee on the front end, wherever they are in the world.
That's awesome. And could you give us like maybe a specific use case that, and a company that's been using a board has been a part of, and, the success that came out of kind of using the platform?
Yeah. So, one example, one of our earliest examples, one of those first customers that took a bet on us, we started working with them. They're an awesome digital agency, kind of headquartered here in Toronto. They're around 30 people. So, that's small to medium sized agency size. And they were doing great, but we're going through a lot of hiring and scaling while also working on some cool new technology themselves. So there was going to be a lot of change and just growth at the organization. So from the outset, we helped them set up their onboarding program, something we know a thing or two about, and then loaded it into our automation software to help them deliver it and actually action it. And so after 40 new employees having gone through the program and gone through the system, we're already seeing how much sort of time and headache we've saved the operations team and the leadership, but also knocking the socks off those new employees who are better prepared, able to get to work, at least meaningful work, a little bit more quickly, and ultimately are more connected to the company and their peers.
That's awesome, man. I think it's so important to have these kind of tools invested. I see a lot of other kind of HRIS tools, just like, like the Bamboos of the world, but they're just like a functional tool that just help you kind of facilitate the whole human resources process. I love what you guys are building in terms of just like making sure there's an active something related to your employees, right? Something active, which I don't find a lot of companies invested in currently. So it's a great mission that you guys are on, and hope you guys have continued success. With that being said, what are your future goals at Aboard before we get into our lightning round here?
Yeah, we were really on that mission or that vision of open sourcing and democratizing all the awesome people programs that a company needs to succeed and grow. We want to, we're in this sort of crazy record-setting funding year, and all these companies of all shapes and sizes are just blowing up. So we want to be part of that success in helping them make sure that they're interviewing well, or more importantly, onboarding well, and have engagement and retention policies and programs in place, so that in the long run, they succeed and we succeed as well. So as much as this is for HR and people, it's also for founders, small business owners, and hopefully one day soon, even those Fortune 500 companies that I spoke to. So, as we're able to kind of work with bigger companies, the world and the workplace and everything is shifting pretty rapidly. And, we want a board to be part of that in helping to enable and define, the new workplace and the new workforce.
Absolutely. We love that. And I think you're doing great work. And I think engagement and kind of everything that we talked about is something that's kind of top of mind, especially with how the market is right now. Obviously, people are kind of all over the place with the employment. And so I think all of these facets are going to improve both experiences for an employee and an employer. So amazing work here. One thing that we like to do before we end all of our podcasts is a lightning round, where we like to get to know you a bit better with questions that are completely unrelated to your business. So we're just going to throw some quick questions at you and just let us know the first thing that comes to mind.
Sounds good.
So Evan, can you tell us maybe your favorite book or movie of all time?
Oh, man. I like to read. My favorite book I'd say of all time, is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Not so much startup specific, but just a study of businesses, larger, well-known businesses, as they've gone through transition and succeeded, and some of the things that they did. And so I think, even though he's studying larger companies, Jim Collins, there's still a lot that you can learn and sort of take away for any sort of startup.
For sure. Yeah, we've got that book a couple of times now. Second here, a company that you're most excited about. What is a company that you're most excited about that is not a board?
I'm right now really digging Float. It's a Toronto-based. It's all about kind of business, corporate spending, virtual visas, super smart like spend management. They just raised $30 million coincidentally, but I was a fan before that. They're just a cool team. Such an awesome product, and I'm a big product lover. So I think what they're doing for small, for any size businesses really, but just what they're doing in business spending management is super cool. And of course, I love seeing that kind of come right out of Toronto, right out of Canada.
Absolutely, yeah. We love Toronto tech, so we'll have to check out Float as well. Yeah. Next question here. If you can have dinner with one person in any point in time, who would that be?
Yeah, I know this might be cliche perhaps, but Steve Jobs. And to be honest, I'm not an Apple user. I don't have a single Apple product, and never really have. Nothing against it. It's just not the ecosystem for me in a sense. But I read his autobiography a little while back, and I guess what that did for me at least is humanize him, make him seem like less of an idol and more of a human, deeply flawed. So I'd love to just sit across from him at dinner, and I know I'd learn so much just from that sort of meal.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone has a story about him, and it just gives one insight into it, and he seems like a real character.
Yeah.
And like on that point too, I think I'm an Apple user, Amin is not. So you guys have that going here. Next question, we also fight on, so we'll see what your opinion is here. Do you like pineapples on your pizza?
It's so funny is that I was having these conversations with people like 2 weeks ago, and it was like controversial topic. I'm 100% a Hawaiian pizza individual. So pineapple on pizza is acceptable. I promote it, and I'm willing to fight for it.
I'm team fruits do not belong on pizza. So
I mean, there's fruits and there's pineapple. Let's be honest.
yeah,
There's
well,
yeah, but fair.
For sure. Evan, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate you taking the time to come speak with us and tell us what you're doing with the board. Can you tell us where we can find you on socials and where we can check out a board to anyone listening?
Yeah, I mean, we actually just polished our website, so it's getaboard.co. So one word, getaboard.co. You can also Google a board. We're on the first page of Google because our
sweet.
SEO isn't
Love
on
it.
fire. And yeah, and I think we're most active on LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn, look up a board. We're obviously Toronto based, pretty easy to find. Yeah, and I'm trying to tweet a little bit. So if you want to get at me, at Evan Hallward, all one word. Yeah, but definitely love to connect. If anything you heard today interests the audience, we're always open.